just finished watching what is probably my most anticipated TV show of the year. Yeah, I'm talking about Squid Game Season 2. Remember all the way back in 2021 during like the height of COVID when Squid Game came out and it just kind of like conquered the culture and conquered TikTok and Instagram and all that stuff. It's like all people were talking about because it was a surprisingly incredible season of television, a season of television that's been sort of diluted by all the spin-offs and the Mr. Beast version and the Netflix version and the memes and everything, but at its core was a really good take on the Battle Royale system that had great character work, amazing performances, and kind of good themes that actually made sense and resonated well. It was just all around a very good season of television. We have been waiting years for the follow-up season, and finally we have it, Squid Game Season 2, 7 episodes dropping on Netflix, but it does have a little bit of a problem. And I'm going to break that problem down. I'm going to talk about this whole season, give my final thoughts, my review, because altogether, I freaking love this thing. This was a great season of television, but there, like I've been saying, and like the title says, there is a major problem. It feels like half a season of television. Squid Game Season 2 is half of a season, and we're waiting for that second half now, and we're going to wait probably about 6-7 months. It should be releasing in the summer as Season 3, but this is half of a season of television that was meant to be a full season that Netflix has decided to split into 2 parts, but call separate seasons. And I don't think that was a smart idea, but let's talk about this season as its own subject first. So Season 2 picks off where Season 1 left off, with our main character, Sung-ji, who of course won the game in the last season, is now trying to take down the Squid Game. He's trying to take down this weird corporation that's running this game and take down the conspiracy and all that stuff. And if you've watched the trailers, you know, lo and behold, he gets himself tangled up in the next game. And the show takes a lot of twists and turns that I will not spoil, but there is, at the end of episode 3, a moment where it clicks and you get at, like, okay, that's what this season's about. That's the story they're trying to tell. And it locks you in again, and there's a lot of really good stuff here. First things first, the first episode of this season is absolutely remarkable. It's an episode that reminded me of the second episode of Season 1, where it was a full episode that takes place away from the game. It's its own location. It takes place in the real world of South Korea. And it was so beautifully done, taking sort of the mental aspect of what goes through these people's minds after they've gone through something like this, and this hunt for answers. It is so well done and ends with one of the greatest sequences I've ever seen in an episode of television. One of the best depictions of Russian roulette. Brilliant, brilliant episode. The second episode slows down a little bit, but once you get to the third episode, we're back in the Squid Game, which is what everybody wanted. They wanted to be back in the games. They wanted to see some of these creative new ways that the maker of the show can torment us with killing new characters. And yeah, that's what you get. You get back in the Squid Games, you get a new cast of characters that are all just as engaging as maybe the first cast. Like, there are some great characters to really kind of latch yourself onto emotionally. You have the mother and son duo. You have Thanos, who's like this just dickhead of a guy who's, you know, the main baddie, I guess, of this group. You get this character who is a transgender man, or man transitioning into being a female, who is probably the best depiction of a transgender character I've ever seen put to screen. This is really, really well done, everything with this character throughout the show. You have a woman who's pregnant, who's kind of like the main girl of this cast, and then you have another guy who had this crypto scheme, and like, there's a bunch of different characters here who are all interacting well with each other, and you grow to really care about them throughout their journey through these games. You don't want to see them die, so much so that when they're actually playing the games, you're rooting for them. I mean, this is the only show I've watched, the only scripted television show that actually has me standing up cheering on these characters as they're trying to survive. It's quite the experience. The only other thing like it that's scripted is like WWE. It's amazing. I was emotionally active as these guys were playing the game, specifically the second game, which of course I'm not going to spoil what these games are, because part of the charm of Squid Games and the experience is being introduced to these games as they are introduced to the characters. And the new ones are extraordinarily smart and well thought out and creative. I always thought it would be hard to do a follow-up, because how do you do new games that are still creative? It's going to feel gimmicky, but they found a way to do things that are really well crafted with the set pieces of how they put together the production and the rooms and everything, but also just really creative in how they can torment the characters, but give the audience that tension, that suspense of how are our characters going to get out of this situation. It's so smart and well put together, the new games that we got here. The show also did a really good job of the mental aspect of being in the game. There's a couple changes to the game itself when it comes to voting to get out and the money and how everything works that I thought did a really good job at creating sort of this more of a divide amongst the players, a very well thought out divide. That adds a lot more tension and a lot more sort of aspects to a lot of these characters that I appreciated. Now, my issue with this season, though, is that it ends in what feels like the middle, because of course it is the middle. This was planned to be a 14 or maybe a little bit less episode season of television that was split in half and made into 2 different seasons because Netflix for some reason. So when this thing ends, it has this big build-up and this great finale with all this craziness crazy stuff happening, and it ends on this insane cliffhanger, and now you're left waiting. And I love me a good cliffhanger in television to keep you hooked for that next season of television or the next movie if it's in film. But this is a cliffhanger that I feel like, man, you are not supposed to wait 6 to 8 months to get the resolution to this, and now we have to. It is a really great cliffhanger, and I just wish that I could watch the next episode right away, and I didn't have to sit here and wait for as long as we're going to have to wait for this thing, because I feel like my investment in these characters, where it is right now, and not just the main characters, not just in our main guy here, our main hero, in Player 456, but in all of the side characters, I feel like that investment and that love that I felt for them by the time the second part, aka Season 3, comes out, they're going to need to do some work to get me reinvested, because enough time will have passed that I don't know if I'm going to care as much. And that is an aspect of Season 1 that was so great. Imagine if in Season 1, in the middle of the season, they decided to take a break for 6 to 8 months. Maybe when it comes back, you don't have that emotional investment in some of these guys, and when the big deaths happen later on, you don't care as much. They don't hit you as much, which is what the first season did so well. That feeling of loss and tragedy in these games, it just really plays itself well, and that's a loss and tragedy that I don't know if I'm going to feel if we come back and some of these characters start getting killed off. Because this season was also very liberal with killing off characters, so far at least. Of course, there are characters that we're introduced to that die, so don't get attached to all of them because I'm telling you, these characters don't die, they're very liberal. But there aren't those incredibly tragic moments that I remember feeling in that first season, at least not yet, and I feel like they're going to come in Season 3 the same way most of the deaths came in the latter half of Season 1. So they get you really attached to a lot of these characters, and then they pull them away from you to break your freaking heart, and maybe 1 or 2 of them will survive, and so far right now, a lot of the characters I'm attached to are still kicking, so that's a good thing, but I just know the rug's gonna be pulled out in the second half. So is this season as good as Season 1? I don't know. Season 1 was like lightning in a bottle. It was almost a perfect season of television. That shock of entering the Squid Game for the first time, being introduced to this world, these characters, it's something that's hard to recreate, which is why I always thought a Season 2 of this show would be tough. How do you do a Season 2 without it being gimmicky? What's your way in? Because now the audience is exposed to this. They know what's going on, and the character, our main character, knows what's going on. So how do you do it in a way that feels refreshing and new? Of course, we've had other Battle Royale genres do, certain things like Hunger Games with Catching Fire. That is a second movie that a lot of people think is better than the first one. A second book that's better than the first one because it didn't do a gimmicky new take on it. Or it was a little bit gimmicky, but they found a way in that felt refreshing. And here I kind of think they did that. They found a way in using the characters, the strength of its characters, and using this idea that the audience knows something that's going on throughout this whole season that the character, our main character, does not know. The audience sees something throughout the whole season that he does not see, and you're almost waiting for it. It's almost like if there's a time bomb under the table and the audience could see it, the characters can't, and you're waiting for it to go off. And with that character usage, the games still feel fresh, the situations feel interesting, and you're hooked. And the gimmicky part of it, the games, the same characters that have these relationships, like, the gimmicky stuff is there, but it does work well enough. The writing is strong enough that you are hooked. And is it as strong as the first season? I guess not. The season does have some slower moments than that first season. I think the second episode is really a drag. I think a lot of the stuff going on outside of the games with the cop characters, there's a whole subplot that I'm sure will develop and go somewhere bigger and better in the third season. Here, doesn't really go anywhere that much. It's not really developed as of yet, and anytime that was going on, I just didn't really care as much. But overall, I did have a really, really good time watching this. I mean, we watched all 7 episodes in like 2 sittings. I really love this. I had a great time with it, and the writing here and just the whole production of Squid Games is superb. And I almost wish that Netflix isn't going to do what I know they're going to do with this, which is remakes, spin-offs, live action, all this crazy shit that they're going to do to milk the hell out of this to the point where it will be gimmicky and it'll forget the point of the themes of Squid Game. But at the very least, this is great. The only negative is that it is half a season. It's not a full season of television. It's not a full story like the first one. You might be like, well, the first one ended on a cliffhanger. Yes, it did. But it felt like a complete circle, a complete story that left the window open for a new story at the end. This doesn't feel like a complete circle that leaves the window open at the end. This feels like half a circle, and we need the other half of the circle to finish this story that's been opened and set up. That hasn't happened, and because of that, I'm a little upset that I have to wait 6 to 8 months, but you know what? This season was still really, really good. I will give Squid Game Season 2 a 4.5 out of 5, and I recommend going to check it out and watching Season 1 if you haven't watched it already. And yeah, Season 3, gonna be a long wait. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like this video, subscribe for more notifications. I'll see you in the next one.